It's the shadow thing. There's just something about being at the beach that speaks to my primordial soul. I guess it's the Viking heritage, the DNA, whatever. But miles before reaching the beach, at the first sniff of salt air, cares melt away, and I am transformed into a carefree, do-nothing soul. Last year, about this time, I began exploring the possibility of spending the month of December in North Myrtle Beach. Now, North Topsail was too far away because our kids now live, one in Myrtle Beach and one in Charleston. As I explored these options, the possibility of spending 2 months, December and January, seemed a doable thing because the monthly rates were unbelievably low in off-season. On December the 1st, 2016, to celebrate the big decade birthday ending in an O, I set off alone on my pilgrimage, my Hajj, my 63 days, wandering mindlessly in the desert. My desert, though, was an oceanfront condo in the northernmost region of North Myrtle Beach, a place called Cherry Grove. For this journey of self-searching, I took all the journals I had kept beginning in 1988 and continuing through November the 30th, 2016. Over the years, I had been rather sporadic in my journaling habits until the last few years. My goal was to read, write, and reflect. It took almost 2 weeks to read the 15 or so journals, stopping periodically to find a grocery store, a TJ Maxx, a Ross, a Marshall's. You all aren't shoppers, are you? Okay. Ken came down for my birthday. The boys joined, and from the middle of December through New Year's, most of the reading and writing was put on hold as we celebrated the holidays and became acquainted with our 2-year-old granddaughter, whom we had met for the first time on December the 15th. By January 3, I was alone again and began flipping back through the journals. My life had changed dramatically from a mom with 2 small kids and a husband living in Richmond to a retired person now in her 7th decade, same husband, living in Emory. As I read through the journals that I had written in the late 90s, I was aware of writing extensively about my involvement with the UUCH and what a major part it had played in my life and continues to play. I thought a lot about the friends I had made and the little community where I felt safe, could express my opinions, my doubts, my fears, my joys, and do this quite openly. For good or bad, I had never felt judged. I spent hours and hours in January sitting by the expansive tinted glass wall in the master bedroom. From the 7th floor balcony, with sliding glass door open most of the time, I watched the tide roll in, the tide roll out, the sun rise, the sun set, just thinking. As Diane told us last week, William Ellery Channing would call this absorbed in self-culture, seeking truth objectively, no matter how uncomfortable. One by one, I started discarding my journals. keeping only the one that I had written from February 2014 to October 2015. I had arrived at my truth and was ready to move on. Most days were planned around the angle of the sun coming in through that open door. Because of the tent, one had to keep the door open to receive the full benefit of the sun. Best time, 10:15 to 2 p.m. Perfect for the reflecting sun off the big water, as our little granddaughter called it. Some say the sun's bad for you. I don't believe it one bit. It's the perfect form of vitamin D, especially in January. My days at Cherry Grove were on fast forward. It's amazing how quickly time passes when you're doing exactly what you want. Photographing sunrises and sunsets, cooking freshly caught fish, scallops, and shrimp. My car could drive itself to Calabash, where the shrimp and fishing boats docked. Near the end of January, a few days before leaving my little Mecca and ending my pilgrimage, I picked up a few books to take home with me. I had read a review in the Myrtle Beach Sun of Thomas Friedman's new book, Thank You for Being Late, An Optimist's Guide to Thriving in the Age of Acceleration. Friedman, if you're not familiar with who he is, has received 3 Pulitzer Prizes for his writing for the New York Times. I opened the book and started reading the inside cover of the dust jacket. We all sense it. Something big is going on. You feel it in your workplace. You feel it when you talk with your kids. You can't miss it when you read the newspapers or watch the news. Our lives are being transformed in so many realms all at once, and it's dizzying. I continued reading. Friedman exposes the tectonic movements that are shaping the world today and explains how to get the most out of them and cushion their worst impacts. His thesis, to understand the 21st century, you need to understand the planet's 3 largest forces: Moore's Law, which is technology, the market, which is globalization, and Mother Nature, which is climate change and the biodiversity law. And he says all are accelerating, all at once. These accelerations are transforming 5 key realms: the workplace, politics, geopolitics, ethics, and community. Now, science and technology have always fascinated me, and I've loved the Twilight Zone and Star Trek growing up. And as someone who has kind of figured out my smartphone and kind of figured out my iPad, I was enthralled reading about the current technology and what was on the horizon. As far as I knew, I had never heard of Moore's Law, which is the observation that the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit doubles every 2 years. And this has been true from 1975 to around 2012. Now, it is happening now about every 2.5 years. For me, this was totally Greek until it was put into a language I understood. Intel CEO Brian Krasnick gave an analogy a layman can understand. The Intel engineers did a rough calculation of what would be the same effect if a 1971 VW Beetle had improved at the same rate. Today, the Beetle would be able to go about 300,000 miles per hour. It would get 2 million miles of gas to the gallon and would cost about 4 cents. You could, roughly speaking, drive your car your whole life on one tank of gas. Now, for some of us, it may take 2 tanks. Friedman writes, think of the introduction of the printing press, the telegraph, the manual typewriter, the telex, mainframe computer, word processor, the PC, the internet, laptop, mobile phones, search engines, mobile apps. Each technology has stood on the shoulders of past technologies, and it has become so short. In the span of 5 to 7 years, the world is being uncomfortably changed because it takes an average of 10 to 15 years to adapt. By the time you get used to change, you're already behind the curve of new technology. We hear about the advances of robotic surgery, gene editing, cloning, and wonder where these developments will lead. And if it's impossible to draft regulations that promote important advancement while still protecting ourselves from the bad side effects, technology is moving too fast for the law to keep up. Eric Teller, CEO of Google X Research and Development Lab, writes, today, the accelerating speed of scientific and technological innovations can outpace the capacity of the average human being and our societal structures to adapt and absorb them. Many of us cannot keep pace anymore. This is a real problem when fast gets really fast. Being slower to adapt means you're really slow and disoriented. Add to this social media and trying to stay connected in the fast-paced world. Think Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, iMessaging, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit. In her book, Memory Illusion, Why You May Not Be Who You Think You Are, Dr. Julia Shaw writes, social media enhances our ability to connect, but amid all the joy and sense of connectedness of all this activity, we occasionally stop and wonder whether this cacophony of impression is actually good for us. She continues, let me tell you a secret. You can't multitask. We think that we can have a conversation over a cup of coffee, check our iPhones, that we can post photos online, and text through a lecture and remember the lecture. You can't do it, she says. Your brain just does not work this way. She continues, as a neuroscientist from MIT puts it, people who think they can multitask well, they can't. They are good at deluding themselves, and the brain is really good at deluding itself. Freelance health and science writer Catherine Hobson questions, feeling lonely? Maybe you're spending too much time on social media. She says, while face-to-face social connectedness is strongly associated with well-being, it's not clear that's the case when it comes to what happens virtually. When so many things are happening all at once, technology, social media, politics, the stress of work and daily life, of caring for children and perhaps of caring for aging parents, a heavy toll is being taken on one's well-being and sanity. Friedman writes, many people seem to be feeling a loss of control and are desperate for navigational help and sense-making. When so many things are accelerating at once, it's easy to feel like you're in a kayak in rushing white water, being carried forward faster and faster and faster. You cannot stick your paddle in to slow down. Friedman believes that building community is one way to make a difference in people's lives. He queries, what happens when we don't just do unto others, but actually do with others in ways that make a difference? He writes, my 4 decades in the Middle East led me to realize that with few exceptions, the political ideology there, whether you were talking about Sunnis, Shiites, Kurds, Israelis, Arabs, Persians, Turks, or Palestinians, it was, I am weak, how can I compromise? I am strong, why should I compromise? The notion of there being a common good or a middle ground that we can all compromise for or upon was not there. He says, now over my nearly 30 years reporting for the New York Times from Washington, each and every passing year, American politics seems to be more and more resembling what I left in the Middle East. Democrats and Republicans are treating each other just as the Sunnis and Shiites, the Arabs and the Persians, the Israelis and the Palestinians, self-segregating, assuming the worst in each other, and lately, shockingly, never wanting your kids to marry one of them. He writes, when individuals get so super empowered and independent at the same time, it becomes more vital than ever to look into the face of your neighbor or the stranger or the migrant and see in that person a brother or a sister. He continues, when I asked Surgeon General Murphy what was the biggest disease in America today, without hesitation he answered, it isn't cancer and it's not heart disease, it's isolation. How ironic that we are the most technologically connected generation in human history, yet most people feel more isolated than ever. The connections that matter most are in short supply today, human to human ones. Christine Robinson, who is the senior minister of the First UU Church in Albuquerque, writes, our lives are often so full there's no room for others, sometimes not even ourselves. If our lives are planned and orchestrated too completely, there is no space for the unexpected, the strange, the wonderful. With community, we can take the risk of knowing and being known. In spite of our temptation to make our friends just like us, we give them the space to be uniquely who they are. In the spring issue of the UU World magazine, then President Peter Morales wrote, our congregations must be a place of safety for one another. The deep divisions in our society, the hatred that is being unleashed, take an emotional and spiritual toll. We must be a place of peace and healing for all who come seeking spiritual refuge. We must be gentle with one another. And finally, in the words of Walter Kanaya, all humanity needs ways of dealing with our fears and anxieties. We need to feel safe. We need a caring group to which we can belong. Everyone needs comfort. Everyone needs kindness. Everyone needs love and support and reassurance. We need places where and people with whom we can address questions about life. in your search for truth and meaning, may each one of you find that community. So be it.